Welcome back, everybody. It is Monday night on the first day of May 2023. I am Kraig Rueth, and my voice has been failing me all day, so we're going to probably have Austin talking a whole lot, which is better for you guys anyway. But we are the IDP Heat Seekers, brought to you by RotoHeat.com again, and Austin is with me as always. Austin, how's the first day of May going for you?
It's not too bad. I didn't even realize it was the first day of May until you said that. I mean, I did, but I didn't really think about it. So far, so good. It's just a Monday, typical Monday. Did have some stuff going on with my dog earlier. My pet had to take him to the vet. That was no fun. But other than that, yeah. She's had two. She's had two strokes, I think, in the past week. Yeah, dude. So it's just been kind of rough. No pun intended.
It's a good one, though.
Yeah, it was a good one, unintentionally. But yeah, so it's been kind of rough for her, and just kind of hoping she'll get healthy again here soon. She's kind of old.
Well, hopefully things turn around for her and she keeps chugging along for you.
Yep. And how about for you?
Yeah, it's been wild. The draft week is one of those where it's highs and lows because you're trying to process everything and get some content out and form your own thoughts while you're reacting to everything that happened. So pretty exhausted even yet today. After work was pretty calm today, thankfully, and I was able to get all that done without too many distractions. But trying to figure all this out, it takes a few days, it takes a few weeks to get everything as far as what's in your mind set for you. But I do want to share with everyone, we do have over at RotoHeat.com, you can see we do have updated rankings for IDP, and of course all of our rookie rankings are updated over there, and there'll be new rankings coming up throughout the next month or so. But I did want to show you guys there. We do have a whole bunch of guys ranked here for IDP players, and there's a whole big list of them. You can see there's a whole bunch of different guys that we have thoughts on that we have ranked here as you get towards the bottom. But you can check those out at RotoHeat.com. And then we have the results of our NFL draft, though, predictions from the prior week here. So if you tuned to the show last week, thank you. And you can see what we had put in for our answers and what the results were down here. And Austin ended up beating me by a score of 9-7. So well done, Austin. Some of these, neither of us got right.
Yeah.
But some of them we did, some of them we split. It was a fun little exercise. I completely messed up. It's 9-8, but either way, I put my little green color coding on cornerback for more cornerbacks taken than edge, but it didn't matter. You still won. So you can kind of see the results there. If you want to go back and listen to that show, that would have been on the 24th of April. We did that for our NFL draft predictions. And you can tell, just like from everyone that does mock drafts, we don't know half of what we think we know, but it's still fun to go through.
Oh, man. Yeah, we found out the hard way, I feel like, from round 1 to round 7. I was just beside myself, wondering how these people have jobs. But that's how it goes.
But tonight we're going to be getting into sort of our thoughts on the IDP relevant players of the NFL draft in rounds 1, certainly, and then getting into day 2. So rounds 2 and 3 we'll be looking at. And we're just going to sort of go down the line here, talking about the IDPs taken. If you are any cornerback aficionados out there, I'm sorry. Again, those aren't the most relevant throughout most leagues, so we're not going to be talking about cornerbacks for the most part. If you want our thoughts on a cornerback and landing spot from round 1 or rounds 2 and 3, please let us know in the chat, and we can certainly jump in there and talk about them. But the first one off the bat, not too much of a surprise, was Will Anderson Jr., but how he got there was a bit of a surprise. He went pick 3 to Houston, who made a huge deal, trading their own 2024 first, along with other stuff, to move up to that spot. I think it was from 12 with Arizona, which is a huge jump, and they got picks 2 and 3, took C.J. Stroud, of course, first, and then Will Anderson. My question for you, Austin, we've sort of beaten the Will Anderson horse to death at this point. Are you comfortable having him be more of a hand-in-the-dirt defensive end, if that is sort of what he ends up playing there in Houston? Because that is sort of the base defense that they have there. You think you're taking him as an edge guy, that's where he would be, but he didn't do a whole lot of that at Alabama.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'd be fine with it. And the reason is I think I don't want to put Will Anderson in a box and say, well, this is what he does. And then if he's asked to do anything different, then that's going to change his game. I think the thing that he does best, and we talked about this whenever we covered Will Anderson pre-draft, was, one of the things I said about him is like the football IQ. When you watch the film, there's just something about what he does that you can tell that no one else is doing. And it's not a matter of, physical attributes and physicality and speed. It's not all of those things. It's the way he plays the game, the way he approaches the game. You can tell that mentally he's like a step above everyone else in college football, in my opinion. It's insane. And the numbers showed that over the course of his career, especially of course in 2021. I don't really have any concerns. I mean, I think he's got the size and the strength and all the, physical tools to be, fine with his hand in the dirt or as a linebacker. I think he can drop into coverage and do different things that are really rare skill sets. But I think asking him to be a traditional defensive end, in my opinion, I don't really have any qualms with it. I think he can find ways to be just as productive in that position as he would as an outside linebacker.
Yeah, and with a smart defensive-minded head coach there, certainly they're going to want to be putting him in. I'm sure they have plans to put him in a position to succeed no matter how they use him. So just an interesting thought I had based on sort of a change of how he was used in college.
It's certainly interesting, though. It's certainly interesting.
The next IDP sort of relevant player, of course, the second defensive player was a cornerback Devon Witherspoon to Seattle. But then we got Tyree Wilson. Looks like he's going to be more of an outside linebacker, which he was in college too. Going to the Las Vegas Raiders, where it seems like he's going to be learning from Chandler Jones to eventually be across from Max Crosby, which is certainly a nice place to be in terms of defenses not focusing on you right off the bat. And learning from Chandler Jones is certainly a good thing too for his development. How do you feel about that landing spot?
Not only Chandler Jones, but Max Crosby. I mean, people are going to say they hate this landing spot, but I actually really like it for Tyree Wilson, and I like the fact that he is going to have two veterans that he can learn from and sort of start to feel his way through the NFL. I think he's NFL ready today. Do I think he needs time? No, not necessarily, but I think it's always a good thing. And I think that it's interesting because Chandler Jones is kind of like a comp to Tyree Wilson, right? With the size, the length, all of the things that Tyree Wilson brings to the table physically. I think their games are kind of similar, and he does fit probably honestly more of a traditional edge rusher role than a linebacker, despite playing more of an outside linebacker role in college, which I think he could get away with. I'm not so sure he could get away with that at the NFL level, but he is an elite pass rusher. And I am really excited still for Tyree Wilson, despite the landing spot. But I really felt like, and you're going to probably hear this, all night on the shows, I really feel like there were a lot of players that I was like really excited about pre-draft. And then when the draft was over, I was like, the NFL just hates fantasy football. And that's the way it feels like it went. Offense and defense are one and the same in that regard. So I don't know. I think long term too, I'm still in on Tyree Wilson. I really like what he brings to the table.
And he does have that flexibility like Chandler Jones. You had mentioned where early in Chandler's career, he was a defensive end for the Patriots. And, he can sort of play both positions. And then Wilson can even go down on that line, on the clear pass rushing downs and play off the line with still Crosby and Chandler off the edge. So certainly gives them another pass rushing option that they're going to need in that division. Moving on. So one of the interesting players that we talked about pre-draft, Jalen Carter, went to what feels to me like the best possible place. There are a lot of people hoping that he went there, mocking that he would go there because of the seemingly now just huge Georgia connection to the Philadelphia Eagles, where they have, I think they said 5 players from the Georgia defense that won the 2021 national championship on their team now.
Yeah.
They just keep drafting them, keep accumulating talent, and I hate it as a Cowboys fan, but it's a really nice defense there. And having Jalen Carter next to a huge defensive tackle like Jordan Davis is only going to help him in that he's not going to be able to just be double teamed. So do you feel as good about that spot as I am?
Yes. And, I thought when this draft, when the pick initially came in, I was like, man, I don't know how I feel about this. Fletcher Cox, who's aging, and then Jordan Davis, who's just a physical specimen, like huge dude. And then you got Jalen Carter. And it's like, man, that's 3 guys that could all play in rotation in the middle. There's only 2 spots. But the cool thing about Jalen Carter is it's a little different from like Jordan Davis and even Fletcher Cox is I think he does have the ability to play inside out a little more than the others just because of the speed and athleticism that he kind of brings with the length that he's got. So I think that he's just a more versatile piece for these 2 that are, in the same category of like defensive tackle. I'm still pretty excited for Jalen Carter. I think it's a nice addition for the Eagles defense. And he should be on the field quite often. Last year, Jordan Davis really didn't see a whole lot of time though. And I thought for sure that like he was at least going to kind of split the work maybe with Fletcher Cox. And that just didn't happen as much. I was kind of disappointed with that. So it's still a situation, I think, to monitor. As talented and as confident as we think we are that Jalen Carter's, the guy. We'll see. I mean, he is talented. I assume he's going to see the field, but like you say all the time, stranger things have happened. So I'm curious, what are your thoughts?
Well, Fletcher Cox is 32 most of the season, and he's been in the league for, I think it's going to be 11 years. They like to use a rotation there, and I think that's only going to help Jalen Carter at the start of his career. I don't think he's going to come out of the gate going gangbusters. Like some people might think he's going to be part of a rotation. Long-term, having him next to Jordan Davis is 2 young guys that know how to play next to each other with just a great defense around them. I think it's fantastic. Again, this first year, probably only value in defensive tackle required leagues, and I wouldn't count on Jalen Carter as a starter in those, but it could happen. We saw Javon Hargrave next to Fletcher Cox last year have a career year and get paid huge after it. I think Jalen Carter is a better talent overall than Javon Hargrave. It's just how much of that playing time is he going to get and earn. And, it has to be said, is his head going to be in the game? But going to a team with so many people that you're familiar with, that are going to hold you accountable and keep you on the straight and narrow, I think it just was a perfect spot for him. So long-term wheels up first year, like pretty much all of these rookies, temper your expectations.
Yeah.
And we are going to jump to a question here quick because Jaws is on here and he got a question for us. I wonder if one of Seattle's cornerbacks gets thrown at significantly more. Which one would it be? General rule of thumb is the rookies are probably going to get picked on more often. I mean, we even saw Sauce Gardner get picked on a bit at the start of last year until people figured out how terrible of an idea that was. They got Tyree Wilson, who they got in the 5th round last year in Seattle, as one of the starters, and it certainly seems like Devon Witherspoon is going to be the other as far as the outside corners. Start of the year, it's going to be the rookie again. If he turns out to be anything like people expect right out the gate, it's probably going to be more of an even split in terms of what coverage and what receiver is going against them. So you have to pick your poison at some point if both are great, but I would assume the rookie gets picked on first. What do you think?
Yeah, I kind of agree with you. It depends on how they line up and, offense, who's covering who. I assume Tyree Wilson, being the more experienced player, will probably – I don't know if they're going to move those. Do you think they move them around on the field? Like, do you think they match them up, or do you think they do sort of more what they did with like Richard Sherman, where it's like, this is your side of the field, this is my side of the field, and we're not going to move around. We're just going to play our game. I'm curious, what are your thoughts on that? Because that could play into this too.
I don't know the tendencies of how they deploy their cornerbacks in Seattle anymore. I'd have to go actually dig into that because it isn't something I study a whole lot, but it is worth looking into when if you're in a cornerback required league and you want to find out, is it possible that someone's just going to avoid a side of the field? Most teams don't do that anymore, where they just have one cornerback on one side of the field and the other. Without knowing, I don't want to speculate too much on that, though. I don't want to give out wrong info.
That might be the answer, though. That might be the answer, is to look at some of the data as far as how Seattle is deploying those cornerbacks and maybe seeing what they did specifically with, Tyree Wilson last year and figuring out, did he move around a lot or did he kind of just stay on one side of the field? And I would think that if he stayed on one side of the field, they're probably going to do more of the same of that. And then conversely, if he was moving all around and just chasing the number one receiver wherever they went, then that could be something that they stick with as well. So that would be an indicator potentially. But these are two very good cornerbacks. And this is quickly becoming a very good secondary once again. I released an article this week that like the recap, and one of the things that I mentioned about this Devon Witherspoon pick was like, this really feels like the kind of player that would have fit perfectly in the Legion of Boom, LOB back when it was. So I like the pick for the Seahawks, and I like the player. And if Jaws is going to force us to talk cornerbacks, then so be it. We will do it. But I hope that answers your question, Jaws.
All right. Going back to the non-cornerback draft order here, we went from 9 with Jalen Carter to Philly to 13 with Lukas Van Ness going to Green Bay. There's some sort of questions out there already in terms of how he's going to be used. Is he going to be used as a defensive end down on the line there? Is he going to revert to playing more of that stand-up edge rusher like Rashawn Gary and Preston Smith and a couple of guys that he's been comped to throughout the draft process, especially Rashawn Gary without the, similar athletically and not a ton of college production. So I wasn't a huge fan of this. I was hoping for a better landing spot. I mean, long term, I think it could be fine being opposite Rashawn Gary, sort of like we talked about with the Raiders. You have two good edge rushers. They can play off of each other, and you can't focus on one as much. So if Lukas Van Ness does turn out to play that role and improve to the point of being a starter in a couple of years when they move on from Preston Smith, it could be great. It just left me wanting more, and I'm not sure how he really fits into that defense at this point, because if they put him down on the line in that base 3-4, it's not nearly as exciting for me.
It was an interesting pick for where they took him. I would have thought that if this was who they really truly wanted, maybe they could have traded down, or I don't know. But looking at the current depth chart, it appears that he's going to line up at the left outside linebacker, and he's sitting behind Preston Smith currently. I think he could push for that job. I think he's talented enough. What I don't know yet is he going to be consistent and reliable enough? He did have limited production, in college, and that was one of the things that a lot of people said about Lukas Van Ness was like they were worried about some of the production stuff, but from a physical standpoint, he kind of checks all the boxes. And so we'll see if he's able to push Preston Smith for that job at left outside linebacker. I kind of like the fit, probably either side. I mean, it doesn't really matter to me, left or right necessarily. But this is now a third linebacker that the Green Bay Packers have with Devondre Campbell and Quay Walker, kind of roaming the middle. That's a very good unit of three guys. And then, of course, if you got Rashawn Gary and Preston Smith in the mix there too, all of a sudden you've got a pretty decent group of linebackers and good depth at that position. So, I don't know that was a position of need for the Packers necessarily. So the pick, when it came through and that's who it was, especially where it was, I was a little shocked.
Yeah, they even have Kingsley Enagbare, who they drafted, I think, in the 5th round last year, who, once Gary got hurt, he actually showed a decent amount of pass rushing prowess, too. That was sort of his calling card coming out of college as well, but he held up well when he was out there once he sort of got his feet wet in the game. So they got 4 sort of edge rushers there that they'll probably use in a rotation somewhat, which can be annoying for fantasy, but I definitely think it's going to still be, once Rashawn Gary's healthy, him and Preston Smith to start. But if Rashawn Gary's not healthy, ready to go start of the season, maybe Van Ness gets a shot right away. We'll have to see. Another interesting pick here with the Jets now at 15. Of course, that's the pick that they swapped with each other in the Aaron Rodgers trade that went down. They took an edge rusher too, and a guy that we talked about possibly going in the late first round. He went mid-first round, almost exactly mid. McDonald IV, edge rusher out of Iowa State, going to the New York Jets. A lot of people seem perplexed by this. It seemed like he went a lot earlier than most people were expecting him to. but he's another guy that just athletically has it, and he's going to be a really nice edge rusher for him, I think, long term. And you think back to last year again, Jets took Jermaine Johnson the second round, pick 28 or something like that in the first round. So they're stacking up in these young athletic edge rushers. Of course, they still have Carl Lawson there. They have Bryce Huff, who I believe they signed like a 1 or 2 year deal here. He's another edge guy this offseason they re-signed. So they're accruing pass rushers as well. How do you feel about this one?
It was an interesting pick. Again, this was another one that I thought, this is a little bit of a head scratcher as far as where he was taken. I thought he was taken a little higher than most people anticipated. He was pretty consistent, though, and he did flash some good, qualities. He's a little more lean than most pass rushers. He's really fast, decent use of his hands. Like, he does some things quite well, and he had good production at Iowa State. Sorry. But at the Jets, I was just like, I couldn't believe that they took an edge rusher. And one of the things that's so perplexing about this is you look at what they did last year in the first round, and they took Jermaine Johnson, and he really didn't do a whole lot last year. I mean, I think that was more opportunity than it was talent. So this year is going to tell us a lot, I think, about Jermaine Johnson. And I think the Jets are saying, look, if Jermaine Johnson isn't it, we've got somebody right behind him who may be able to be it. And so it's going to sort itself out with these two, I think, at the left end position. And there's also Carl Lawson, right, who has had the injuries and things like that happening. So maybe there's a possibility McDonald sneaks in there and just plays opposite of Jermaine Johnson. And now these are your two, edge rushers. So it'll be an interesting situation to watch play out this season. And we'll see. I mean, I'm not super high on Will McDonald. I think, like, I'm in a draft right now, and I'm in the third round, and I have no thoughts of taking McDonald at all. So,
yeah, they seem to be building on strength there. Certainly with the Jets, where they already had drafted a pass rusher, they got a couple guys, so they're continuing to build on that instead of really reaching for other positions. Like, you'd think, well, long term they got to figure out quarterback, because it seems like they're unsure what they're doing with Aaron Rodgers beyond this year, and is Zach Wilson going to be the guy? I think they're sort of hoping Zach Wilson figures it out behind Aaron Rodgers, although it seems like a dangerous game to play for me. But you got to have pass rushers to survive in the NFL, and building on that strength. A bad idea, but it was, again, like I said, a curious choice of edge rushers there.
Absolutely.
This next one, I'm sure you have some thoughts on, as everyone seems to, and it was a big surprise in the fantasy community for IDP, and then also the NFL draft. Number 18 overall, Detroit takes Jack Campbell, linebacker out of Iowa. Now, they just signed Alex Anzalone to a nice deal. I think it was 3 years, around $18 million or something like that, and it's pretty easy to get out after 2 years. They could get out after one if they wanted to. But for year one, Campbell's going to be on the field, I think, at the same time as Anzalone, which is going to hamper both of their potential production. Looking beyond this year, I know you're a big Malcolm Rodriguez fan. I'm not saying he couldn't get on the field too, but how are you liking this spot for Jack Campbell long-term in that Lions defense?
This is exactly what I thought would happen to Malcolm Rodriguez when I talked about it last year. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm a huge fan of Malcolm Rodriguez. I love the way he approaches the game, but this is precisely what I said could happen, is the Lions could be taking a linebacker that is, from a size standpoint, he's got the advantage.
Yep.
I think he's got the talent too. I mean, he's going to control the middle of the field. That just is what it is. But what I will say is I actually think that's a good thing for Malcolm Rodriguez. And I'm still in on Malcolm Rodriguez being able to push Alex Anzalone for the second linebacker job, more of like an outside linebacker-ish, like a weak side linebacker. So I actually like this. I mean, I love it for Jack Campbell. A lot of people wondered, why did they make that pick? Well, look at who they have. And last year it was Malcolm Rodriguez and Alex Anzalone. Anzalone didn't play well. I didn't anticipate he would. Malcolm Rodriguez played well for what the expectations were. I would say exceptionally well for what the expectations were, considering he was a 6th round pick. But they needed a linebacker in the middle of the field. They needed one last year, and they needed one again this year, and they finally got it. And I think that Jack Campbell is going to be a staple in that defense for, a long time. I love the athletic profile. Again, one of the things that does concern me is he doesn't really get to the quarterback very much. They don't, he's a tackler. He gets a ton of tackles. And he does really well in that department, but he didn't really get to the quarterback a whole lot in college. I'm not sure how much sack upside he's going to have in the NFL. So we'll see, but I do like this. I do like him as being the kind of player that has a really good floor because of the tackles and his ability to, rack up numbers in that department. So I like it. I don't mind it. I think that they could have done better. I don't know. I think they could have done better on the Jahmyr Gibbs pick too, but that's neither here nor there. The picks are what they are at this point, and I think they addressed at an area of need, and I think they did it with a very talented linebacker, and I don't mind the pick as much as other people do.
Yeah, when you're talking about the landing spots, the linebackers, off the top of my head, there wasn't one, at least as early guys that are likely have a clear path to playing time. You'd think might have a clear path to playing time, ended up with one. It seems like most of them are going to be in a committee early on or a backup, which it's fine. We've dealt with it. We said it wasn't a great true linebacker class outside the first couple, and even they didn't land in the best spots. But Campbell really had the best immediate landing spot on these guys, it feels like, which if you would have asked me after the Lions made that pick, I would have said, probably a couple guys are going to land better and might, move up for immediate production over him. But it really doesn't feel like that. And we'll get to those guys when we get to them here. But it was a block class for linebacker landing spots. Next guy on our list here right after that at 19, this was a little bit earlier than I thought he would go, but I really like the landing spot. Calijah Kancey, defensive lineman, went to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I'll tell you why I like this. He got into the sort of position where he's going to be asked to sort of do what Aaron Donald did with the Rams, which, again, unfair comparison just because they're about the same size from the same school, but they're going to be used in similar ways here. And Calijah Kancey being next to Vita Vea, the huge nose tackle for Tampa Bay in the middle, who's going to be eating up those blockers. This is going to let Kancey do what he does best, which is when he's on the field, is use those stunts, use a spin move, power rush to get to the quarterback. He's going to be a pressure defensive tackle, and going to a spot where he has that big, again, run blocking nose tackle, block eating nose tackle. I like the spot a lot. It was a lot better than some of the spots that he could have gone to. I don't think there's going to be huge immediate IDP production, but I think it's going to give him that opportunity to get on the field as that pass rusher and get you some production when he's on there. And long term, Vita Vea locked up, I really like the spot. How do you feel about this one with seemingly rebuilding Tampa team, but also, seemingly still trying to be relevant too with some of the guys they have?
Yeah, I really like this. And it's funny. It was somebody said, so you're 1 for 31. And I was like, yes. So I actually predicted this Calijah Kancey in my mock draft to Tampa Bay. It was the only one I got right. So woo me. And a lot of people said, well, why? I don't understand the pick, Vita Vea, and he's a defensive tackle. And how are you? No. Timeout, guys. Calijah Kancey can play from the inside out, just kind of the same way that we talked about Jalen Carter being able to do. Two different players, but that first step for Kancey, he is explosive off the line. He gets in the backfield quick, and he does bring good power and size with his frame. Like, his athleticism is superb for his size. So I really like this pick. I think that he can coexist with Vita Vea. And I think the good thing is he's going to be able to create pressure up front and allow these linebackers that they have to do a little more of what they do best, which I think that's really critical for a guy like Devon White, just having somebody who can, whether it's somebody that can blow up the backfield or somebody that can take on blockers. I kind of think that Calijah Kancey and Vita Vea can do a really good job of doing both of those things. And then that frees up Devon White to be able to use his speed to get to the quarterback and make plays and things like that. And you still have Kancey and Vita Vea, who are both, they do a really good job of being able to get off blocks, stretch the line of scrimmage, get sideline to sideline as far as, just getting flat down the line. They do a lot of those things really, really well. And I actually, personally, I really like this pick. I like the player a lot. And I think there were better landing spots for him. Sure, I could make the case for that. But I still think that this is a really good one.
All right. Moving on down the line, and it takes a bit to get to another non-quarterback IDP player taken here because we had Deonte Banks go at 24 to the Giants cornerback. And then all the way down to 26, my Dallas Cowboys, a bit surprisingly to me, took a defensive tackle, Mazi Smith out of Michigan. And again, he was perceived as a potential late day one guy. I didn't have him going in the first round. I thought that was a little bit early for him. Micah Parsons certainly seems excited about it, having a huge athletic tackle to eat up those blocks and also hopefully create some pressure. It looks like he's probably going to be more the nose tackle out of the two long term, and then Osa Odigizua be more pass rushing specialist defensive tackle there long term. So remains to be seen how that plays out. He's got work to do in as far as refining his game. I don't think he's probably going to be IDP relevant maybe ever in most leagues because he's just not that sort of guy, and he hasn't shown to have those pass rushing numbers in college, so it's not just going to immediately happen in the NFL. Could develop it long term, especially with those guys that he has there around him that he can learn from and play off of. But IDP wise, this wasn't much of a exciting pick for me. How about you?
Yeah, I mean, for fantasy purposes, it's a defensive tackle and one that isn't really versatile like, the last two that we've talked about, Jalen Carter and Calijah Kancey. He is more of like he's going to stay in the middle of the field, anchor the middle, try to take on two blockers and just be disruptive with his size. But he's pretty athletic too. He's just very strong. I think this was more of a good football pick than it was a fantasy pick. And that's basically all I've got for it. We could, there's not, like you said, there's not really a whole lot to talk about with Mazi.
That's going to lead us into a question we got here from James Evans, confirming he agrees. Yes, real world GMs hate fantasy, and he appreciates us talking about the Raiders pass rush early. But his question is, of all the rookie defensive tackles taken in the first and second round, who do you think will have the most run-stopping tackles? And I'm going to tell you my answer. We haven't gotten them to yet, but it's down there in the second round. Pick 53 to Chicago. It's Gervon Dexter Sr. Now, probably not who most people would be thinking of. He just started playing football, junior year of high school, still learning the position. He is huge. I think he's like 6'6", 310 pounds. The Bears need defensive line help. They turned around and took another defensive tackle towards the start of the third round, Zach Pickens out of South Carolina. What I like about Gervon Dexter is, despite, I think he played 3 years in college. The last 2 years, he had 50 and 55 combined tackles, which are nice numbers for a defensive tackle. And he's going to be more out of the two of them. He's going to be the run stopping, the huge guy that's going to eat up blocks and be able to get those runs up the middle. He's going to have to be double teamed to be contained once he starts growing into his own at the NFL level. He has a lot of those nuances to learn, but he's a great character guy. He's grown a lot, and he has the body to do it. So if I have to pick one, and I know it's not the answer most people would give, I'm really excited about him down in Chicago being on the defensive line, and he could get playing time early there. What did you think for James's question?
Yeah. I don't want to take the easy way out and just say Jalen Carter. This is interesting. It's a great question, by the way, and I appreciate you sending that over. So I want to look at one thing real quick. So Bryan Bresee is listed as a starter here for the Saints, but I was a little bit lower on him than others. So I think just looking at the list, since there's only a handful that were taken in the first and second, I'm actually going to go with my guy, Calijah Kancey. I really do think that he is going to be active enough and athletic enough to be able to create opportunities for himself to be able to rack up tackles in that defense and use, Vita Vea is not that player. He's more of the, just clog things up and let guys go make plays more than he is like running anybody down. Calijah Kancey is the kind of guy that he could actually run some people down, like tackles for loss, sacks, tackles. He could really, at the defensive tackle, quote unquote, position. I would put my money on him just purely for the athleticism. If I'm not doing it on Jalen Carter, honestly, I'm probably doing it for Calijah Kancey, and it's just purely for the sake of the athleticism that these guys have, their ability to run and do different things very, very well. I think gives them just a better shot to be able to be in on more plays. And so I'll go with Calijah Kancey.
And the believed defensive tackles out of this group, because of course it does vary a bit depending on where you look. Jalen Carter at 9 to Philadelphia. Then we had Kancey, we talked about, 19 to Tampa Bay. Then we got Mazi Smith to Dallas at 26. Bryan Bresee at 29 to New Orleans. And that's it for the first round. Going into the second round here, you got a ways to go. Some people have Keion White listed as a defensive tackle at 46 to New England. I don't think he's going to fill that role. I think he's probably going to be more of a defensive end edge player. I was really confused by seeing that, but you never know. Gervon Dexter that I mentioned, 53 to Chicago. And believed to be defensive tackle. So again, there's only like 5, maybe 6 guys there in that list, but it is an interesting group. And hopefully we'll get into the second round here soon. But before we do that, I want to thank everyone for watching us over on YouTube, Facebook, however you're getting a hold of us. Make sure you hit that subscribe button so you get all the content with the IDP Heat Seekers and then the Fantasy Buffet later in the week. And you get to see Austin, Brad, Sully, all the guys putting out shorts, letting you know quick hits of guys they're looking for. Interesting facts you might not know, guys to trade away, anything under the sun you can think of. So again, thank you guys for tuning in, and make sure you're subscribed. Next guy up here on our list, we're getting towards the end. Over the top. Sorry, my internet cut out. All right, but for the end of the draft here, as far as the first round, Myles Murphy to Cincinnati, defensive end out of Clemson. Went a lot later than some people thought, although sort of mocks the day of had him falling a ways. Probably not an immediate starter here. He's going to be behind Sam Hubbard and behind Trey Hendrickson to start, but he could certainly have some opportunity to play inside, on pass rushing downs with his size and the ability that he has. So you mentioned Austin. Not a lot of these were super exciting right off the bat for IDP, but how you feeling about Myles Murphy going to the Cincinnati Bengals and their quest to get to the Super Bowl?
I really, really like this kid a lot and was hopeful that he would have gone to a better situation. Probably one of the worst situations I could have asked for, but that's okay. Because in a perfect world, everybody stays healthy all year and Myles Murphy is just purely rotational. The reality of that is that sometimes things happen and opportunities are presented. And if I was to choose anybody to bet on to say, hey, they're not a starter today, but opportunity presents itself. How do you think it turns out? Like Myles Murphy is one of those guys that if just give him the opportunity and he's going to make something of it. He's really, truly that talented. He has the size. He physically, he's got everything you'd like. I think he shows a lot of promise as well. And I am bumping him down slightly in terms of rankings and in terms of, where I would acquire him in a rookie draft, but he's the kind of player that when you draft him, you might not expect immediate production, but you got a really talented player who you can hang on to, and it's probably going to work out for you. So I would say long-term, probably better than, first year production. I would be more hopeful for that. But yeah, the landing spot really hurt.
Moving on, again, we got 4 of these to end the first round here. The next guy up, we mentioned before, Bryan Bresee going to the New Orleans Saints, defensive tackle, the high recruit coming out of high school. Good athleticism, just couldn't stay healthy, and then had some other concerns pop up. Saints have been trying to figure out this defensive line for a while. They need help across from Cam Jordan. They tried Marcus Davenport. That didn't work out. He couldn't stay healthy, and he's gone to Minnesota now. Peyton Turner, they took in the first round in 2021, and I think he's played in 13 games and has like 2 sacks or something like that. That hasn't worked out. Carl Granderson's the current opposite defensive end, and he's been all right, but nothing amazing for IDP purposes. And same thing, them trying to figure out the interior there. They had like Shai Tuttle, and he's gone, I think, now to Carolina. They had David Anamata, who I think he's gone to the Falcons. So defensive tackle was a need for them. They had signed a couple guys in free agency, but again, no big names. If he's healthy, do you think he's going to have one of the starting spots and have a chance for immediate production from the defensive tackle spot?
Yes. Short answer. That's where I'm at. I just wasn't a big fan of pre-draft process. I wasn't a big fan of Bresee. The athletic profile for his size is really, really good. And but the production and the availability, and then at times I didn't feel like he really played with as much of a motor as I would like to see. On plays that are going away from him, I was like, oh, come on. Sure, we'll see what he does with the opportunity, because it looks like he's going to have it. And I could be totally wrong. I could be totally wrong on this guy.
Probably only a defensive tackle play well, even if he does start. Most standard leagues play defensive lineman. He's not going to matter for you either way, though. Next guy could, though. Nolan Smith, another Georgia guy we talked about earlier on in the show, going from the Georgia Bulldogs to Philadelphia. Going to be another edge rusher there. He can start out behind Hassan Reddick, Josh Sweat. Certainly going to be able to get on the field for at least, partial role on defense. Long term, I like it a lot. But there isn't really a whole lot more to say about him than he'll probably go higher in drafts than I'm looking to. Do like the long-term spot, but how are you feeling about this? I'm just annoyed at the Eagles, quite frankly.
As a Cowboys fan, I know.
Yeah.
They did extremely well, and I like this pick. It's one of those picks where the upside on it is just tremendous. Seeing where he went, 30th overall. If he would have been healthy and had a full year of production at the level that we think that he could, you're talking about potentially, probably arguably top 2. Besides Will Anderson, I don't know that there's a player that I think could have a higher ceiling than Nolan Smith. And again, I'm in a rookie draft right now, and full disclosure, I drafted Nolan Smith, and I drafted him at 208. So I drafted him in the second, and he was the third. He was the third defensive end taken. Will Anderson went late in the first. Tyree Wilson went 205, and then a few picks later, I actually got Nolan Smith. So pretty happy with the pick. I like the landing spot a whole lot. And so I'm excited for what he'll do. I hope that he can stay healthy. I think that's the real big kicker there.
Yeah, with his size, you got to hope that he's able to hold up at the NFL level, because the guy with his already high ability, stopping the run, the intelligence that he has, and that pass rushing potential, especially on that defense where clearly, they had all sorts of guys getting sacks and some of their old veterans getting career highs. He's going to be part of a rotation. He's not going to be gangbusters right away, I don't think, but he's going to be able to have an impact in long term. I agree. His ceiling's really high if he's able to stay on the field. Rounding out the first round, pick 31 overall, because the Dolphins forfeited a pick, we have your Kansas City Chiefs taking Felix Anudike-Uzomah, defensive end out of Kansas State. We talked about in our draft prediction show and a couple of the other shows when we were going over the edge players that the Chiefs did have an opportunity to add an edge here, and they did so in the first round. So how are you feeling about a Kansas State guy staying with Kansas City?
I think I've said it enough, hopefully, and I hope you don't think I'm just saying this just because he went to Kansas City. Pre-draft process, when I'm going through rookies and I'm just identifying, and I'm just going through film one by one, and I'm just identifying which ones jump off the screen and which ones do I like. Drew Sanders was like my number one. And for whatever reason, Felix Anudike-Uzomah was like one of those edge rushers that I was like, this kid's really showing me something. Like, I really liked him. I just liked the way he played. So I don't know. I mean, I think if you asked me, I would probably say I prefer Myles Murphy, but he wasn't there. Obviously, he wasn't available. And then, we'll talk about some of the other ones in the second round. And I don't know, maybe I would have preferred some of them too, but I thought this was a really good pick. It did address an area of need. I think that the Chiefs needed somebody opposite of Karlaftis. And, it looks like they have that right now. Charles Omenihu is listed as a starter opposite of him, but I think that Anudike-Uzomah could really push for that job. We'll see how camp goes in the off season and everything that goes on leading up to the season, how he holds up. I think he does still need some polish. I don't think that he's a complete player yet. I don't think that, I think that he'll need a little bit of coaching and a little bit of time to get to where the Chiefs are hoping that he will be. But I do like the player. I like the team, obviously. And I like the pick. I'm good with it.
All right. Well, that takes us into the second round here of the NFL draft, and we had to wait a bit to get into some defensive players. The first one that was not a quarterback, because of course Joey Porter Jr. went first, pick 32 to the Steelers, was Derick Hall, defensive end / linebacker, edge rusher certainly for the Seattle Seahawks out of Auburn. They are stacking up on some of these guys. They drafted Boye Mafe at second or third round last year, I think, out of Minnesota. So it's another edge rusher. We talked about it on our edge show. Derick Hall certainly has just crazy level of pursuit and aggression and just get after it, a high motor. He's going to have to rein some of that in, going to have to improve a little bit on some of the tackling stuff, but certainly is a nice guy to throw in there on a rebuilding pass rush for Seattle. And with those cornerbacks here that we think are going to be good, it's going to give him some more time with that pass rushing group to get to the quarterback. So how did you feel about him being the next edge guy taken off the board here and going to Seattle?
Well, I mean, I don't hate it. It's fine. There are a couple players a little further down we'll talk about that I think I might like a little more. And one of the things about Derick Hall is that, again, this is kind of like Felix Anudike-Uzomah. I think he's going to need a little bit of polish and some time. The Seattle Seahawks last year, they drafted a guy that I really liked too. It was Boye Mafe. And one thing that Boye Mafe did really well was that he was an excellent pass rusher with like exceptional physical tools. And I kind of think the same about Derick Hall when I'm looking at this, and I'm like, I don't know, man. He's just going to need some polish, but his athleticism is like crazy. And I feel like the Seahawks, this is 2 years in a row now that they've gone after a player that show that freakish athletic ability, but maybe lack some of the polish to be like a complete every down player and not be more of like a specialist player. So we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, both Mafe and Hall, I don't think are going to be pushed into starting this year even. They have Darrell Taylor, who did all right, and they have Uchenna Nwosu, who they had signed to a decent-sized deal as sort of their starters there. Mm-hmm. So both are going to be pass rushing, options. They're going to be in a rotation, which I think is certainly fine for both of them. But long-term, if they pan out, they certainly could be turning that corner and improving their pass rush. Because their defensive line, they got a little bit of help. They went and got John Reed, who had been with the Chiefs after going from Seattle to there, and then Green Bay. He had to stop there, and then Draymond Jones, the big contract that they signed. And a guy that we won't be going into tonight, but I'm just talking about just another monster of a guy, size-wise anyway. Mike Morris went later in the draft from Michigan. His potential long-term piece there. If nothing else, he should be able to eat up blockers too. So we got an edge rush run here. Next up is Isaiah Foskey going to the aforementioned New Orleans Saints. We talked about Bryan Bresee there. Foskey goes 40th overall to the Saints, and I kind of already went down this path, but they've been trying to find someone across from Cam Jordan, and at this point, probably a Cam Jordan replacement for several years here. Cam Jordan's going to be like 34 this year or something like that. So for the NFL, that's getting to be ancient, but he's still productive. Great player to learn from. I sort of like the spot. Really don't know that he's going to end up starting either because they just haven't had great luck getting that second defensive end spot filled out. But do you think he could be the long-term answer there, defensive end for him?
No, I mean, it just he's got excellent lower body strength, but his upper body strength for me is a little bit like lacking and concerning. That's just my opinion on what I saw. But it does feel like the Saints have been grasping for someone opposite of Cameron Jordan for a long time. And, maybe he's it. I don't know. But at this stage, he's not. I mean, we'll see if he can win the starting job. If he wins the starting job, I think he'll be on the right track at least. But I'm not really certain. I mean, he's 6 foot. He's 262. I mean, I don't know. I wasn't really super high on Foskey as a pure edge rusher. Maybe he could play more of an outside linebacker role for them, but doesn't excite me a whole lot.
Well, I bet this next one does excite you more. And we're going to go to this next one right in a row, and then we're going to jump around the list. But BJ Ojulari, I was incorrect. He went earlier than his brother Aziz did 2 years earlier. Aziz went around, I think it was pick 50 to the Giants. BJ. There's some talk of them trying Zaven Collins as a pass rusher. Could see that. But certainly BJ Ojulari has, that just elite level of bend, athleticism, and just flexibility to get around the edge. I think he could really be going into a spot where he could have immediate production for a team because they just need edge rushing. Cardinals, sorry if you're a Cardinals fan, but I think they admitted that when they were trading back, getting these extra picks and sort of retooling their team overall. Will it be for a Kyler Murray replacement in next year's draft? There's a lot that remains to be seen if Kyler Murray even comes back healthy. But I know you liked Ojulari. How'd you like the landing spot with Arizona?
I really liked it, and here's why: is the Arizona Cardinals were thought to be one of the teams that was going to draft Will Anderson, and then they ended up being a team that I believe they're the ones that traded out with the Texans, right?
Yep.
Yeah, they traded out of their spot with So they traded out of the Will Anderson spot, acquired some picks along the way, and then here they are in the second round, and they go, oh yeah, by the way, we are going to get an edge rusher, and it's BJ Ojulari, and I really like that pick. So I thought they did a really good job there. The value for where they got him was good. The return that they got out of trading out of that number 3 spot, I thought was really good. The Cardinals did a really good job with this pick for a team that looks like it's probably not going to finish very high, this year. They need as much help as they can get. I thought they did really well on the trade in the first round, and then I thought they did well with this pick here.
All right. We are moving on to finally a safety here. The first safety taken at pick 45, which it was later than people thought. Brian Branch going to the Detroit Lions. Be interesting to see how he ends up playing with the pieces that they have there. It would seem like Tracy Walker's entrenched as one safety, Kirby Joseph maybe the other, maybe Chauncey Gardner-Johnson as a safety, although he's played cornerback as well. Good thing about Brian Branch is he can do all that stuff too. You can play slot corner for you. You can play either safety spot. He's extremely smart, very versatile, sort of did it all there at Alabama. Long term, I love the spot with that defense that they're building and that offense they already have this year. Kind of got some questions about how he's going to be used. Is he going to be more of a sub guy with the pieces they already have? Is he going to be starting over Kirby Joseph? A lot of it remains to be seen, but I think by the end of the season, he's probably going to have a good shot to be in the starting lineup and make an impact for maybe closer to the playoffs that they're hopefully going to get to. And long term, I love the spot. I love the player, and I think it's a great spot. How about you?
I would agree with everything that you just said, and he's just too good of a player to leave off the field. Tracy Walker last year was dealing with some injuries.
Yep.
I think he's a better player personally than Kirby Joseph. So I think one way or the other, he's going to find a way onto the field, and then I think once he's there, he's going to have a hard time taking him off.
All right, our next guy I mentioned a bit earlier, Keion White. out of Georgia Tech, defensive end, extremely athletic, and I know we keep saying that, but even for the NFL level, like Keion White's athleticism was off the charts. Big guy, still learning the position, had been a tight end in college. I hate one of these guys that I like go to the Patriots because for the most part they get stuck in these rotations and they just aren't completely fantasy relevant to the point that they could be. Probably better for real life NFL, to have those guys fresh and on the field more. I was disappointed in the landing spot. How about you?
Yeah, kind of the same. I mean, what he does is so different than what Dietrich Wise does, I feel like. And so it'll be interesting to see what the Patriots do there. I don't love the landing spot. I think he probably, at least in this first year, he's doing more watching than playing. But we'll see. I mean, it's a Bill Belichick defense, and to your point, it's a little bit hard to predict. I thought their first round pick, Christian Gonzalez, I really loved that, by the way. I know we're not talking corners, but oh my goodness, I love that pick, and I like the player, and it's a little bit more predictable, the secondary feels like, in those Bill Belichick defenses. But what they do at linebacker and up front, sometimes it is a little frustrating and can be confusing. And so we'll see what that means for Keion White after year one.
We only really have a couple guys left here in the second round, and that's probably all we'll get through this week. We'll jump into the third round next week, as there's probably not as many day 3 guys of the draft that are as relevant or important to go over anyway. As they get farther down in the rounds, the likelihood of making the team diminishes and any sort of instant impact. We have another defensive back here, Jartavius Martin out of Illinois. He played all over. Certainly they need help. It is the Washington Commanders, who he went to with pick 47 at cornerback. But safety, it feels like they kind of were set last year with Derek Forrest and Cameron Curl. They did play a lot of 3 safeties, so he could still see the field quite a bit. He could be used as a nickel cornerback. I was just a bit confused by it. What did you think about what they were doing here by taking a safety?
I think they did need a lot of help, and he is listed as a nickel right now. Emmanuel Forbes was the other cornerback that they took in the first round. I think he could really help out this defense, especially in terms of coverage. We'll see how he can hold up with his frame and tackles. He plays with no fear, but unfortunately, you could get away with things like that a little more in college than you can in the pros.
Yep.
So I think as a third option, it's intriguing. We'll see what the Commanders do, but to your point, they just needed a lot of help in the secondary, and they needed to address that. And I think they did that with both of these picks. And we'll see what it means. I don't know that it has any fantasy relevance. I think, probably just more of a real football impact than anything.
Gervon Dexter, I had mentioned earlier, kind of give my thoughts on him, but he is a defensive tackle, so we probably don't need to talk too much about him. And I know you want to get to this next guy. Pick 54 to the Chargers, Tuli Tuipulotu to the Los Angeles Chargers from USC. Certainly a couple guys you can learn from there. Enjoy Bosa and Khalil Mack. How you feeling about the fit with him on that Chargers defense going forward?
Man, once again, the NFL just hates fantasy football. This was a guy that I really, really liked, like a lot, who could have been in the right landing spot, could have been a sleeper, could have been probably a starter day one. I really think he has that kind of upside. I don't know. It's Khalil Mack and Joey Bosa. But I think both have had their injuries, right? Khalil Mack
that's the
and
other.
Joey Bosa. So that's really the key is if these guys are healthy, great. The problem is they haven't been healthy. So for Tuli Tuipulotu, that's a mouthful.
It is.
He's got a real shot to get an opportunity, not just by way of injury, but I think just in general. I don't want to see what he does with the opportunity. I'm intrigued by him as a player. I always have been. I wish it would have been a different spot, of course. Same could be said about a lot of these players. It was a very frustrating draft, but I still really like this player. I'm still very intrigued by him, and he's somebody I'll be keeping an eye on. I will tell you that for sure.
Yeah, long term, I like the spot, and he's a guy they could even shift down to. I forget who we talked about it earlier. You could put him on the line sort of at the defensive end and that base 3-4 and those pass rushing downs where he's going to have a chance just to get after the quarterback like he did at USC. And you have him out there with Bosa and Mack at the same time, and it could really create problems because he does have the size to play inside sometimes, just, not full time. So I do like the spot there for a potential impact early on, but you're probably going to be waiting a little bit before he's a starter unless there's injury. Since this is an IDP show, just to sort of close it out here, there were some cornerbacks. Like I said, the most drafted position for IDP players and in the draft period was cornerbacks this year. For the second round, we had Joey Porter Jr. at 32 to Pittsburgh, we mentioned. We had Julius Brents. And that is a cornerback out of Kansas State to Indianapolis at 44. We had, we talked about him, Cam Smith out of South Carolina, 51 to Miami. And Tyreek Stevenson, 56 out of Miami, Florida to the Chicago Bears. And DJ Turner II from Michigan, a very speedy guy with an interesting landing spot in Cincinnati there. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to give some love to the cornerbacks because I am in leagues where you're required to play cornerbacks, and it's fun, but it's still, we know our audience, and most of you aren't playing cornerbacks out there, and even the ones that you are, you're not going to be drafting a cornerback early, hoping, that's not a word, Kraig, hoping for a Sauce Gardner year, because we know those are the outlier as opposed to the rule. So,
yeah, they are the outlier. I mean, like you mentioned, they're going to try to pick on rookies, and if I'll just throw two out there that I feel like deserve the honorable mention. You kind of named them off, but Joey Porter Jr. is like, if you do play in a cornerback league that requires you to play a cornerback and you're looking to, you're probably not going to draft a rookie, but if you pick him up on waivers, it's probably the best way I would recommend. Have him on your lineup, stash him, and see what he can do, because I really think he is exceptionally talented and could really pay dividends, especially if he's targeted a lot. And then I think the second one, looking through here, was like I mentioned earlier, I just really like Christian Gonzalez, kid from Oregon that landed in New England.
That is going to do it for our show tonight. Again, it was sort of the first and second round of the NFL draft. The most likely IDP relevant guys as far as positions that we went through. We'll be doing the same thing next week, finishing up round 3 that we really didn't get into, but then sort of handpicking some guys that we like out of 4, 5, 6, and 7, because it gets a lot harder to sort those guys out. But Austin, anything else you want to leave the folks watching with us tonight? We've had a great group of people watching and some nice questions tonight.
Yeah, we did. And hey, Jaws, again, thanks for stopping in. You stop in all the time. We recognize that. We appreciate you for being a longtime viewer, listener, and just participating in the chats. James Evans, new face, good to see you. Thank you for your question. And everybody who asked questions tonight, thank you guys so much for tuning in. For those of you who didn't ask questions but just enjoyed the show, or for those of you who will enjoy the show later after this is over, thank you guys again for following RotoHeat. We appreciate your support, and follow us on YouTube. Subscribe to our channel, of course. You can follow us on Twitter. We have our @RotoHeat Kraig, @RotoHeat Austin. You can see our Twitter handles below. Other than that, be sure you guys are following along on rotoheat.com for rankings, articles, shorts, all the fun stuff. And you guys have a great week.
Yep, that'll do it for us. We will be back in next week, same bat time, same bat channel. But until then,